Video games are a complex form of art, but you never have to think too hard before explaining them. Here's the character, that's their quest, they go and they do it. Here's a couple of acclaimed games that are fairly easy to summarize, even though some of them have dozens, even hundreds of hours of playthrough. The reason it's so easy to summarize these games is that they start from a simple, clear premise. Some of them have intricate, almost philosophical plots, but the scenario from which the player character starts is relatable. Even when the story becomes complicated, it's still clear in its presentation. So what is Baldur's Gate 3 about? To put it very short and technical, it's about a group of adventurers who are drawn into a struggle for survival and the power conflict involving an elder brain. What if we want a more poetic summary? Well, it's a dark fantasy epic about people who discover themselves through power conflicts, who make peace with their traumas, discover their identities, and bring a glimmer of hope to a dark and unforgiving world. Baldur's Gate 3 does require a few sentences to explain compared to some other role-playing games. And that's why it's arguably one of the most complex role-playing games of our generation. The difference, let's say, with Witcher 3 is that the Witcher 3 exposition also foreshadows the conclusion. Geralt finds Ciri, and they live happily ever after. Unless you are the greatest douchebag fantasy has ever seen. However, we get no such clarity from Baldur's Gate 3. But there is a common word in both of the summaries that I made, and that is power, which seems to be the main theme of the game, a leitmotif, if you will. Baldur's Gate 3 is an amalgam of stories, unique characters in interesting places. It's not just one story, but 100, put together through well-crafted narrative means. But the more I neared the end of the game, I felt an odd feeling of unfulfillment, and at the same time a sense of oversaturation. In the end, we defeat the Elder Brain, an eldritch being who threatens to enslave the minds of everyone. But what was achieved exactly? Baldur's Gate is saved, but it's a city that we only see in Act 3 and which we barely get to know. As a player, I felt my motivation starting to wear off at the end of Act 2, and apparently I wasn't the only one. My brother, for example, said he loved the game. Of course, how can you not love Baldur's Gate 3? But when I asked him why he put the game on hold at the end of Act 1, he wasn't sure. That means that some players weren't very caught up in the main story. The result is that the main plot almost feels more like a secondary plot. Now, this is not uncommon with Dungeons & Dragons games. They are, after all, designed so that the player gets lost in the adventure rather than the reason why the adventure started in the first place. For example, in Act 3, I was more interested in the side quests than I cared for the Nether Stones and who gets to have them in the end. Yes, the Elder Brain is dangerous, so dangerous that it sends earthquakes which makes the screen shake. But for some reason, I didn't care. There is an NPC called Mysticarian. He is a back-alley necromancer who deals in spirit charms and has his vital organs hidden in 3 ghouls scattered throughout the city. That's much more interesting. I cared about that. There are a few reasons why the villains of this game might not be convincing. They all crave power seemingly for power's sake. The main story of Baldur's Gate 3 is all about ultimate control and domination. It almost feels like it has a dominatrix theme. Sure, the ambition to become powerful is a classic fantasy trope, but when the final goal is just that, it feels empty and meaningless. What is this power for? What urge or need does it satisfy? Your companions come with their own unique stories, but not all of them seek power. Shadowheart wants to fulfill her duty and find out who she is. Lae'zel has a zealous, undying loyalty to her people. And that's where the game sets a whole new dimension. Because so far, the characters seem to have a better story than the main plot. Maybe there is a reason why they are on the cover. But going back to the villains for a moment, in Baldur's Gate 3, we don't have just one villain, like in many other games. Here we have 3 at least, 5 if you include Raphael. And if you ask me, that's too many. At the end of the day, everyone wants power. The obsession with power in this game is so pervasive, so blatant, that it almost feels like a parody sometimes.
You have one last chance to bow. Once it's gone, I'll have no choice but to destroy you both. Do you hear? Bow!
Seriously, in this game, a child shows more restraint and maturity than the villains. But if you peel the story, and sometimes you must literally throw a die to uncover the story, you discover the many layers of subplot and lore, the small, hidden stories. The main plot then becomes more of a metaphor, maybe even a satire of sorts. Power is merely a tool, and therein lies the lesson. The characters of this game are the actual story, the NPCs as well. The cats of this game are the story. Baldur's Gate 3 is the actual sum of its parts, a journey in which every stop and action is a puzzle piece to a grander idea, an allegory spun of 100 well-crafted threads, a metaphor of epic proportions that leads to a clear, almost foregone conclusion. That it's so easy to become the evil you're pursuing, that pride is its own downfall, and that overconfidence can indeed be a slow and insidious killer. And that is why Baldur's Gate 3 has, in my opinion, become an instant classic. Not because of its overused fantasy trope, but due to the thousands of details that make it an authentic journey of dark imagination. So, why the bittersweet critique then? Why am I not adding to the dozens of videos saying that Baldur's Gate 3 is perfect? Well, because it's not. And if we call it perfect, it's like saying this is it. All other games must do is to copy this recipe, there's nothing else to do in the world of gaming. When in fact, there is room for improvement, and I'm sure the team at Larian will be the first to admit that. What is perfect about Baldur's Gate 3 is the work ethic and the company's exemplary ethos of game development, their respect for their fans. It's truly comforting to see a game director and company CEO accompanied by his lead writers everywhere he goes. It's truly heartwarming to see a company that cares so much about music. Because if there are still game developers out there who don't give a damn about story and music, not only they are delusional, but they've never played a game called Half-Life, which is truly embarrassing. Now I do want to make one thing clear. I love this game and it's easily in the top 10 I've ever played. And the reason I'm critical of it is the fact that I care about it so much. This game has made me a better fiction writer, and I think it's taught me some lessons about how we can affect and influence those around us. But most importantly, I find myself thinking about it. Sometimes I listen to its soundtrack. It gave me a memorable gaming experience. And there's another crucial thing to mention here. Baldur's Gate 3 brought the role-playing genre, and by that I mean true role-playing games, back into mainstream. And I couldn't be happier about this. Because this means we will get more high-quality role-playing games in the future, right? Anyway, let's start at the very beginning and talk about an old little game called Baldur's Gate 2. And yes, in the time between the two games, we probably graduated high school and uni, and got our first job and learned about the dreaded prospect of changing a services provider by phone. But even though Baldur's Gate 2 is arguably an old game, a recent replay reminded me just why this titan of an RPG genre has held so well over the years. Yes, it's still good, go and play it. There are also parallels between the two games, as there should be. And just like us, the game, Baldur's Gate, has matured. Baldur's Gate 2 is a late Dungeons & Dragons campaign. That means the characters you are controlling start at a higher level with more powers and spells. The plot is a direct continuation of the story of Baldur's Gate 1. The story picks up where Baldur's Gate 1 finished, with your character killing Sarevok and accepting the revelation that you are the child of the Lord of Murder god Baal. In other words, a bit of a demigod. You also discover that there are other offspring of Baal in the world. This gives cohesion to the game's story, which is equally a theme about mortals versus gods, but also a carefully crafted political intrigue. That's why Baldur's Gate 2 starts with a feeling of history and familiarity. Your character already knows the companions who join you at the beginning. It's worth noting that me and many other players started the Baldur's Gate saga with Baldur's Gate 2, just because it happened to be very popular at the time. And yet, the story doesn't feel confusing. It convinces you that something important has occurred and that you are the result of that. You survived, even thrived, despite your dark background. It gives you just enough backstory and lets the atmosphere and excellent voice acting and dialogue do the rest. Imoen is a companion you grew up with, a sort of little sister or best friend. Jaheira knows you and talks about great adventures at your side. You already know Minsk and his hamster, but also that he is quick to anger, and this is implied by the dialogue options. These are your friends, and you all find yourselves imprisoned and at the mercy of your mysterious captor. This gives your character an immediate prophetic importance, as you already know that you are the child of Baal, the god of murder, but also that you have performed great feats of adventuring. You are also hunted and prejudiced because of your infamous heritage. You are Baal spawn, tainted, and a little more than a monster. This sets out an incredible opportunity to take the evil path, as you can argue that all you're doing is embracing your destiny and your inheritance. To rule the world as Baal's chosen is a right. Everything about the start of Baldur's Gate 2 is fascinating. If this was your first D&D game, you didn't know what half of the words even mean. What is taco? Why is my armor going down and not up? But this also provides you with ample opportunities to explore and experiment. The very first dialogue options that you choose have immediate consequences. Everything you touch has an effect. The rooms are full of traps, but also clues about who your captor is and his personality. You find that he conducts evil experiments to ascend to godhood. He is the mage Irenicus, who plays with the life of other beings as if it is a material, an ingredient in his dark alchemy that is the pursuit of immortality. To Irenicus, anyone can be expendable. Everyone is. By the time you finish escaping his dungeon, you not only scorn him, but you know exactly how the game works, what to do and what not to. You encounter two genies, a vampire and a demon spawn. The reward system is very generous. You can get a +2 sword, dozens of spell scrolls, including a level 6 summon air elemental. By the time you finish the prologue, you feel empowered, emboldened to adventure, to go out and seek Irenicus and demand to know why he tortured you and your friends, or to explore his offer for power. And, in spirit of true role-playing games, you can just walk out of the dungeon and ignore everything. The choice is yours. It's not a mystery why Baldur's Gate 2 is still talked about today. It's arguably one of the best games ever made, even if you're not a D&D connoisseur. When you're finally out of the dungeon, you not only witness the display of how immensely strong the antagonist is, but you also feel a bit defeated.
All involved will be held. This disturbance is over.
Must I be interrupted at every turn? Enough of this!
The game then literally throws you into a huge explorable world with no guidance. For me, this was not only liberating, but it felt like the game trusted me to know what to do, to figure it out. Baldur's Gate 3 is a bit different. You start as a captive, very similar to Baldur's Gate 2, but everything is much more chaotic and exciting. You are in a literal car chase, but with dragons and tentacles. The very first dialogue options that you get is not with a person, but with an object. You interact with the object, you roll the die, and you feel something that is very similar to the feeling of gambling. There are two things that the game teaches you straight away. In this game, dialogue options can have dire consequences, much more complex than Baldur's Gate 2. But also that things in this game explode. The introduction is loaded full with intrigue. The Mind Flayer ship desperately trying to escape the Githyanki riders. People randomly plucked from the street and put into pods. And then, literal hell which Lae'zel can see through the cracks in the ship. This feels much more dynamic than the dungeon crawl, claustrophobic atmosphere of the prologue in Baldur's Gate 2. For me, it felt like 1,000 events had just happened and I can't wait to catch up. Who is chasing who? Why? What is happening? Why is there a war going on in hell? The mystery is brimming at the edge of how much unknown I can accept from the start of a story. But somehow, I still feel eager to uncover it, to find out more. And then you get to what is probably one of my favorite moments in the entire game. You interact with a dying man, but it's not a man anymore. It's an intellect devourer, a brain with legs. Is this the foreshadowing of the biggest antagonist in the game? There are dice that roll in the background. That's equally exciting and frustrating, as the game tells you that your character has failed to see or understand something. The dialogue options immediately show you the tremendous work that was put into this game. You can save the Intellect Devourer, not save it but cripple it, or you can simply fail everything and the Intellect Devourer just sprouts out and leaves. This will make every other of their kind on the ship attack you. The game tries to show you that you need to think twice before you do something. These are real choices. The name of the Intellect Devourer is Us. You can find Us later in the game and save them again, which then turns them into a permanent summon. Sorry, Scratch, but you cannot compete with horrifying cuteness. If Us dies here, however, you won't find them again. If you manage to save Us, they become your ally. The dialogue options in the game then not only have the power of life and death, but they can change the game physically. Every action then becomes a force of destiny. This is not just a binary choice game that brands itself as an RPG, but an authentic role-playing experience in which your characters can change the world around them. So, time for a quick comparison. In Cyberpunk 2077, if you choose the Street Kid prologue, you encounter a cop called Inspector Stintz. He arrests you, but your partner in crime Jackie seems to know him. Inspector Stintz grew up in the same area as you, but took a different path. Now he thinks he turned out well and has a disdain for everyone who didn't. Typical cop behavior. He is even tempted to let you go, but then a corporate douchebag strolls in and tells him to kill you. Stintz orders his cop buddies to break your legs, which they don't because that would make it hard to actually play the game. Anyway, this is fine. I thought especially for a Street Kid scenario, V and Jackie being arrested by someone they knew from childhood opens a nice dynamic for future interactions. But there is a problem. Inspector Stintz does not come up again in the game. Never. Not even once. So, your arrest is not only inconsequential, but the game tells you that some of the characters you will meet have no value, no bearing on the story. This is not just plain boring, but you feel like you just wasted your time watching a cinematic in which you had no control and which had no effect on the game. You are just a witness of game cinematic events. By comparison, Us can fight alongside you in the final battle of the game. There's, however, an even more important thing to discuss here. I think this scene really sets the tone and mood for the entire game. This game is, undoubtedly, a dark fantasy. It shows a cruel, unforgiving, and brutal world, and you are just another force that can make it better or worse. In the same prologue, you stumble upon a room full of captives held in mind flayer pods. They might be innocent victims, captives just like you, but you cannot save them. Is it cruelty or mercy to kill them? The game is morally ambiguous at best, as only a dark fantasy can be. It tells you that some evils you simply can't undo. You find your first companions, who are complete strangers and who are already bickering with each other, something that I found distracting. And finally you get to your first battle, accompanied by Borislav's best hit, Yabi Dobi, and here you have two options. Try to make a run for it, an option reiterated by everyone in your vicinity and by the timer in the right-hand corner of the screen, or become the role-playing gamer that the developers know you are and try to grab the devil's flaming sword. If you decide to stay and fight, the game makes it difficult for you to do so, but also gives you tools to deal with the increased challenge. You can try to kill the devil quickly, but his allies are quick to come to his aid. You can gather all the Nautiloid tanks and place them around the devil, meanwhile trying to debuff him and buff the Mind Flayer that is your ally. Or you can do the unthinkable and gather all the chests in the area and place them in front of the door to barricade the entrance, which of course is ridiculous. You then escape the ship and fall to your game over. No. You land softly on the ground. How? Could it be the object that Shadowheart managed to conceal so well on the ship? We have an entire chapter about the artifact, but for now, the prologue ends with a few unknown characters watching your ship crash from a distance, which eases the prologue into Act 1 and builds mystery. And just like its predecessor, Baldur's Gate 3 manages to give you a complete, shorter tutorial story that encompasses the philosophy of the game, its mechanics, and its tone. So far, this is role-playing at its best, and it gets even better. Let's talk about Tieflings, the race pick that makes your GM roll their eyes. In Baldur's Gate 3, I would argue they are the most important story element of the entire game. After escaping from the crashed ship, you stumble upon a druid town which is under attack by goblins. It's also filled with Tiefling refugees who have escaped the Blood War. a conflict that is far away from the events in Baldur's Gate 3. The Druids are in conflict with a faction named the Cult of the Absolute, and the Tieflings are caught in the middle. They escaped a war that they didn't start, only to find themselves in the middle of a different conflict that they don't belong in. The Druids are divided between accepting the refugees or driving them away, leaving them at the mercy of goblins. Because what makes for a better bigot in a video game than a lover of nature? Okay, so at this point, for someone just jumping into D&D, or someone who isn't very experienced with the tabletop version of the game and all its campaigns, me included, this was a bit confusing. What are the Tieflings doing here? And isn't it an odd coincidence that they're here at the same time when we are? And the answer is a very clever plot device. A plot device is when a writer wants something to happen because it's good for the story in the long run, but it just doesn't fit the story at the time or feels out of place. A good example of a plot device is when Aragorn falls to his presumed death, only to survive and on his way back to Helm's Deep sees the Uruk-hai army, so he manages to warn everyone about it. But the Tieflings in Act 1 are not exactly moving the plot of Baldur's Gate 3. They are simply there, and then they are there again. And hey, what do you know? They made it all the way to Baldur's Gate. In a normal game, you would survive the crash and come upon a druid town. A druid town filled with, well, druids. And you have the friendly druid and the wise druid, and of course the unlikable hateful druid, and the sleepy lazy bear and the friendly mouse and the grumpy mouse, and then the very very bad druid that everyone cast out. This is already looking like a great faction. They are in conflict with the goblin camp, who are dirty and evil and have Cockney accents and serve a mysterious god called the Absolute, but who are way more fun than the stuck-up druids. You choose to help the druids or the goblins, gain a new companion from either faction, and proceed to the next part of the game. That's what a normal game would have done. But Baldur's Gate 3 is not a normal game. Larian, as we will discuss in this video, likes to overdo things. And that's how you get the Tieflings. And the friendly druid now becomes a humanitarian, and the hateful leader becomes a bigot and a hypocrite. They are, in the end, maybe a little less evil than the goblins.
I hardly need a bodyguard, Tilsis. This isn't Avernus.
No, sir. At least the monsters there looked like monsters.
And now you get a third faction that not only fills the place, literally, and makes the druid camp seem much bigger than it is, but a third faction that gives context to the other two. The Tieflings are the element that stirs the pot. They spice up the story and dynamize the story. I don't think that's a word, but let's go with it. But that's just part of the plot device. If you save the Tieflings, they follow you throughout the rest of the game all the way to the final battle, just like us. The Tieflings then become a recurring, episodic, collective character. They are your moral compass. They simply make the game better. Not only that, but I like to think they are a metaphor for hope in this game, the redemption of a world that is wrought with cruelty. So, what are the Tieflings anyway? They are humans tainted with demonic blood who have suffered a history of oppression on account of their demonic traits. And that makes them perfect. They are proud, stubborn, funny, full of flaws and vulnerabilities. They are your local goth community, the kids in the block, the misfits, and you become their hero. And if you side with the Absolute and kill them, not only do you miss on potential quests, but dozens of interactions. The game then motivates you to choose the good path. Because if you attack the Grove and side with the Absolute, it creates the very sad situation of you killing defenseless people. It's embarrassing, really. They can barely put up a fight. And for what, Larian? And this is good writing. Yes, the obvious moral choice is to help them. But you become so attached to them so immediately that it seems like there is no other choice. The game, the story, compels you to save them for more content and for having more allies in the final fight. By the time you are finished with all their quests, you feel like you belong with them. They are your people. What if you do choose the evil path here? Well, it's pitiful, of course, but the game respects your decision and gives you your drow lover, which is legitimized by fantastic acting.
Watched over you as you slept, peaceful and silent. And I spoke to our god. I asked her why she had chosen you, made you one of her faithful, when you are so clearly broken. Beautiful, but broken. There is something missing.
Evil people have their sad stories too, I guess. But the game respects your choice and gives you the best that it can with that choice. While exploring the region in Act 1, you become more familiar with your tadpole condition and realize that it's giving you powers. Moreover, the followers of the Absolute see you as a true soul, basically someone that had a tadpole implant and serves the Absolute as one of its officers. I always like to play Drow here, just to hear the brilliant dialogue options and reactions that you get from the goblins. The cult of the Absolute is exactly what it sounds like, a cult. They are frenetic in their belief that the Absolute is, well, the Absolute. Not exactly the most unique of names for a goddess. But meeting their acolytes and exploring their camp, you also see the Absolute as a manipulative power, goading its followers and believers into the false sense of belonging to something greater, only to use them and enthrall them. The very inconspicuous object that Shadowheart was trying to conceal, turns out, is what the Absolute wants. And you walking into their midst with the only thing that they want is not only ironic, but it stands to show how cults can be blind to reality in their frenzy to serve a dark purpose. Perhaps I'm overthinking that, but that's my roleplay, okay? There is a brilliant scene here where one of the true souls realizes who you are and what you're carrying, and you must roll some really hard dice to fool him. But we all know what we all did in the end: attack the goblin camp, including the goblin children. Thanks, Sven. Act 1 is arguably the most polished narrative of Baldur's Gate 3, and we haven't even talked about the Underdark. The mystery build-up here is top level, and the myriads of choices seemingly endless. And now we get to the bitter part of this critique. The artifact, or the Astral Prism, is central to the story of Baldur's Gate 3. If Shadowheart doesn't survive the ship crash, it's bequeathed upon you by unseen forces. You can't drop it, you can't put it away, because if you did, then the game would be over. This fact alone makes Baldur's Gate 3 a story about an item of power. It's essentially a story where the item is central to the outcome of the plot, but also has immense influence on anyone that interacts with it, and of course the villain wants it. So in a way, this makes the item an object character. It's the kind of item that is not just a weapon, but something that is almost seen as a person. And the writers at Larian took this idea even further and made the object an actual prison that opens a different plane of existence, like a pocket dimension. So then, let's look at a story that does the item of power trope really well. And by that I mean, of course, The Lord of the Rings. What are the features that make the One Ring a brilliant object character? And I know this might be a bit unfair, but let's compare the One Ring with the Astral Prism. 1. The item is regarded as extremely powerful and the antagonist wants it. Yes. 2. Its powers come with a huge drawback. No, not really. The Astral Prism protects us from the influence of the Elder Brain, but also gives us free reign to consume tadpoles with no apparent drawbacks. It's a carte blanche to just do whatever you want. You get Mind Flayer powers without becoming one. And don't get me wrong, I like how much Larian respects players' time by making game mechanics unnecessarily burdensome. But in this case, I feel it affects the story. 3. It changes the people around it and turns them against each other. Yes, Lae'zel and Shadowheart fighting each other is a perfect example. Although I would have loved to see a much more damaging consequence in the party, like someone betraying the group, joining the enemy. The two characters that bicker with each other from second one of the game is not really an unexpected conflict. 4. The item changes the hero. No. Yes, the artifact keeps us safe from the Elder Brain, but I rarely thought about the artifact when I played, and that's because the story does not align with the gameplay mechanics. It is true, you hear the Emperor's voice in your dialogue options, who tries to influence your choices, but his advice is usually good advice, if not pragmatic. It's like a tutorial for making smart in-game decisions. And if you don't agree with him, you can just ignore him. If the Emperor turned out to be a bad guy, then the artifact itself could have been the reason for our moral downfall. But that doesn't happen. All we needed for this item to be taken seriously was someone stealing it, even briefly, for us to see what it feels like to be under the influence of the Elder Brain. For example, Shadowheart steals back the artifact and runs away with it. She goes by herself into Shar's temple, hoping to become a Justicar and prove to her god that she is worthy. Without the artifact, we no longer have control of our actions or dialogue options, so we start making some bad decisions on our way there. Things become chaotic. We finally find Shadowheart and we need to pass some difficult checks not only to convince her, but to control ourselves and not kill her outright. There is a battle and now we have the artifact back, but also Shadowheart's realization of how much damage the Astral Prism can do if it's not kept with the group. Another fun example would have been someone constantly trying to steal it from our pockets in the middle of a fight. Just anything to take this item seriously. 5. It's a metaphor, and the idea of power rather than physical possession of power. No, the artifact is the extension of the actual power of the Githyanki Prince. Orpheus is extremely powerful, and he keeps the Elder Brain's influence at bay. Sure, there could be a metaphor there somewhere, but it's too far detached from the actual events of the game. 6. The item looks harmless. Yes, well, sure. Ignoring the aggressive design of the Githyanki, it doesn't look too scary. It's not a sword or a weapon or anything like that, and it's relatively easy to conceal. I still think the comparison wasn't too bad. The item looks like an addition to the story that builds mystery while not necessarily leading to suspense. But that's because we don't feel its effects that strongly. The numerous interactions you have with the Emperor serve to make the artifact an even better element of the story, especially the nice reveal that it's in fact a prison and the reason that you're not yet dead. But then we get to the second problem. Remember when I said that it feels like your character is catching up with events? That was an understatement. There is a reason you don't really think about the artifact. It has a long history and you, the player character, is not involved with it. There is a massive prologue before the game even begins that we're never told. Creative writing teachers always tell students that the prologue of their novels feel more like chapter 1, and that's because that's often the case. They say, go back a bit and let the reader ease into the story. And then you do that and they tell you again to go back even further, and at some point you realize that writing courses are not for fantasy writers because the teachers have never read George Martin. Excuse my short burst of frustration aimed at academia. It's a fantasy story. The prologue is supposed to be a bit confusing because you are introducing a massive new world to the reader, or in this case, the gamer. But you still have to do it right. For example, Planescape Torment does this very well. The Nameless One wakes up having no memory of his previous actions, but slowly discovers that he is one of the many reiterations of his own self. He is reincarnated, and his previous versions affected the world in countless ways. But the amnesia part is what gives the player the sense of a clean slate, a new beginning. Baldur's Gate 3, on the other hand, hides a novel that takes place before the Mind Flayer ship chase, and then it slowly drips you the story through the amnesiac and not at all forthcoming Shadowheart. And finally, towards the end of the game, when we don't care anymore, through Gortash's memoirs, some of which are locked in a vault. Why would someone keep their memoirs in a vault? Gortash, my guy. It's so hard to find out what happened before the beginning of the game that you eventually give up and just go along with the story as it is. Mystery is nice, yes, to a point. I had to look up the story, do research. I gave myself a quest of finding the truth behind the Astral Prism. And that's how the D&D adventure was not just in the game anymore, but in my life. And that's why Baldur's Gate 3 is the game of the year. Seriously, not cool, Sven. Here's a short summary of the events taking place before and leading up to the ship chase. A famous adventurer by the name of Baldur is tired of the normal difficulty of his adventures, so he dials it up to honor mode. That's how he ends up venturing into an area called the Moonrise Towers, where he stumbles upon a Mind Flayer colony. There he is captured and turned into an Illithid, a Mind Flayer, but escapes after 14 years of imprisonment and returns to Baldur's Gate aided by his dragon friend Ansur. In disguise, he collaborates, or manipulates, the Duke Stelmane, and together they rule Baldur's Gate through a faction called the Knights of the Shield, while Baldur takes upon the nickname of Emperor. Meanwhile, Gortash, a corrupt politician, escapes indenture from a devil called Raphael, who is the son of Mephistopheles, and becomes the chosen of Bane, the god of tyranny. You see, Bane, Baal, and Merkel were defeated a long time before the events in Baldur's Gate 3, and now they want revenge and to return to the world through the help of their chosen. Gortash befriends a character called the Dark Urge, a progeny and chosen of Baal, and both come to the realization of the incredible benefits of an alliance between the three evil gods, Bane, Baal, and Merkel. After all, their divisiveness is what got them defeated in the first place. Yes, unity is strength, you foolish evil gods. Gortash is tasked by Bane to go back to the Hells and steal an artifact called the Crown of Karsus and 3 Netherstones, which are all items of immense power remnant from an ancient civilization called the Netherese, who were the masters of magic. But while doing the heist, they discover a document that proposes a plan to capture an illithid elder brain and use those artifacts to control it, thus giving someone the ability to basically control everyone. And that's how their plan for the Cult of the Absolute begins. Meanwhile, the Urge starts killing people on the streets of Baldur's Gate to sow chaos in the city. A city in chaos needs a savior. Think ancient Rome, Caesar, that kind of thing. The influence of Gortash rises and he discovers the true identity of the Emperor. He unmasks the Emperor for a mind flare and gains control over him through the Netherstone-controlled Elderbane. Finally, Gortash and the Urge resurrect a dead general called Ketheric Torm as the final piece of the trio and task him with raising an immense goblin army, or orc army. The army, controlled by the Absolute, would attack Baldur's Gate and Gortash would defeat it, and so become the hero of Baldur's Gate. All of that to become the lord of a city with 23,000 people? Okay. Either Ball, Bane and Merkel are being a bit modest, or they're really not that powerful to begin with. Everything is going as planned, but they receive information of a Githyanki artifact that can block the power of the Elder Brain, controlled or not, and this could ruin their perfectly crafted evil plan. Gortash sends his minion, the Emperor, to retrieve this artifact on a reconditioned Mind Flayer ship, but does not predict that another faction, the Cult of the Dark Goddess Shar, also wants it, who see the Cult of the Absolute as a rival threat. Shadowheart, the priestess of Shar, accompanied by a Sharian task force, managed to sneak into the ship, hitch a ride, and steal the artifact for themselves. And come back with what, Shadowheart? A goblin space Uber? The Emperor manages not only to steal the artifact, but escape the Githyanki town/asteroid, causing pursuit by the Gith Dragon Riders we see in the opening cinematic. The Shar task force is meanwhile captured on the ship, but the Emperor, through his interaction with the artifact, becomes free of the Elder Brain's influence and decides to hide the artifact in Shadowheart's pockets while he himself enters it. Inside, he discovers the reason why the Elder Brain is cancelled by the artifact. It seems that Orpheus, the son of Gith herself, has been imprisoned there. He has the unique ability to cancel any illithid power. In a shift of political power, Blackith, an evil Githyanki necromancer, imprisoned and chained him inside the astral prism, thus creating a weapon that can be used against the Mind Flayers and imprison her greatest political opponent at the same time. Brilliant. This sounds like an entire game that happened before Baldur's Gate 3. Also, the plot holes in this backstory are so many that it would take hours to discuss them. For example, how can the Elder Brain control the Emperor from another plane? How did the Emperor discover that the prism is an astral pocket? How did he manage not only to break into a Gith fortress, but escape it? There are two levels of overcomplicated plots, convoluted and ridiculous, and Baldur's Gate 3 comes dangerously close to the second. And now let's talk about my guy, the Emperor. Mind Flayers, or better said the Illithid, are central to Baldur's Gate 3, not just for the story, but for gameplay mechanics as well. The game starts with them and pretty much ends with them, or ends with you becoming one of them, or Karlach as one of them, which is something you should never ever do. Please don't do that to Karlach. But Mind Flayers already existed before Baldur's Gate 3 came out, so obviously Larian had to respect their design and lore. They are interesting creatures by design. They use psionic abilities, are governed by a hive mind, and are very intelligent. The fact that they enslave other races by mind controlling them, no less, makes them despisable. But coming from a tabletop game design perspective, they were created to offer challenging fights to the players. They were not meant to become characters with depth, internal conflicts, and complex motivation. They are mind monsters, which makes them interesting, but they are monsters. A Mind Flayer's body was, in fact, a gruesome mockery of the humanoid form. An Illithid's flesh was soft, supple, moist, and rubbery, resulting in an unmistakable texture, easily distinguishable from any other creature by anyone familiar with it. Their skin ranged from mauve to greenish-violet in color. When you encounter the Illithid in other RPGs, they are cruel, emotionless, and focused on their singular purpose to serve the Elder Brain, the hive mind that controls and unites them. Mind Flayers had utterly alien thought processes and enigmatic objectives. They saw themselves as masterminds that twisted others into serving their own sinister and far-reaching schemes. They are clearly an inspiration drawn directly from H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu, which is why they are probably not meant to be understood. Their minds are different, their reasoning too alien to be comprehended, and therefore their goals ultimately evil. They are dangerous, to be avoided. Withers, who is a former god, says that mind flayers lose their souls through the process called ceremorphosis, which is irrelevant to the story, but discourages the player from becoming one. Stephen King's It is also a direct reference to Cthulhu and the cosmic eldritch evil, whose motivations are beyond human comprehension and therefore inherently malevolent. In Neverwinter Nights: Hordes of the Underdark, a game which explores the Underdark in depth, they can be reasoned with, and their motives are perhaps not that estranged from a human who seeks political advantage, expansion, or even survival. But they don't come across as friendly or even likable in any way. They keep slaves, and they are still responsible for segregating and displacing an entire race, the Gith. Baldur's Gate 3 steers away from the canon by humanizing mind flayers. You have the peculiar friendly mind flayer of the Underdark, the guardian, potential ally, even possible to romance mind flayer in the artifact, even the pitiable mind flayer that we find in the basement of a windmill. And finally, you, or Karlach, can become one. This is bold as a narrative design, but becoming a mind flayer ends up being purely an aesthetic choice. There is no real gravity felt in the choice, no drawback if you don't take the mind flayer path, no great advantage if you do. It doesn't even feel like a path. And this is what the mind flayer part of the main story lacks. You can become a mind flayer because it's cool and powerful, and not because you believe in them or because you really need to. Take Prey, for example. In Prey, you have to develop your Typhon abilities to be able to beat the game. You have to become alien to beat the aliens. And yes, it's a trope, but it's such a good trope. There's no such incentive in Baldur's Gate 3. There were so many questions running through my mind in the opening cinematic, as the Illithid seemed to be losing, desperately trying to get away from the Gith. The way I interpreted that was that the Illithid, evil as they may be, were trying to survive, because they are shown as being vulnerable, in a way, desperately collecting as many hosts for their tadpoles in their escape, looking to bolster their numbers. I really liked the implication of that hypothesis, but ultimately what the game offered us was a story about an artifact and the different factions who fight for its control. The Mind Flayer aspect of the story, then, serves the more important plot, which is the artifact. Would it have been so bad if this story was about the Illithid, their downfall, and the few of them who are redeemable? Their humanization. What if the Githyanki have become so bad that they actually make the Illithid look good? Which they arguably do sometimes. Instead, the Mind Flayers become just a means through which the player character can obtain the Astral Prism and some very modest abilities. The Emperor becomes the tutorial assistant for your handling of the artifact. However, when it is revealed that not only he used to be a human, but the founder of Baldur's Gate, we do get an interesting character who ended up being a victim of circumstance, just like the player. The Emperor's deceit, when he appears to us in a pleasant form, proves how much we are affected by what we consider to be normal. The Dream Visitor is meant to comfort us, to make us feel safe, even loved. And he's right when he says that we would have never trusted him if he had first appeared as an Illithid. When faced with our own inherent prejudice, we instantly forgive him. This was probably the best part of the Emperor's story, if not the best part of the main story. It has a bit of Count of Monte Cristo vibe to it, or The Fallen Prince returned from exile. It's romantic and relatable. Also, for a character locked in an object, he holds considerable sway over the story. This makes him unique, interesting, and powerful. But when faced with the choice of keeping Orpheus imprisoned or releasing him, which is the culmination of our relationship with the Emperor, he stops being a powerful character. If you free Orpheus, he runs and sides with the Elder Brain. If you keep Orpheus chained, we can give him the power to destroy or enthrall the Elder Brain. Either way, he becomes just another thorn in our back or a potential ally. I really wish that his deception had been a double one. If in the end the Emperor proved to be the real villain, that would give credit to Lae'zel's mistrust and make her character more than an angry, spiteful Githyanki. Or that we could have convinced him to free Orpheus and get over his fears of the Githyanki prince. That would have made him have a complete arc as a good guy. The way the game deals with him lets him hover in a position of weak neutrality. A character that could have become the best villain of the game gets diluted into the myriad of options that we get to deal with Orpheus and the artifact. I would argue that choice in an RPG is good, but the story is even more important. We can absolutely see how much effort the writers put into this character, but his conclusion is underwhelming, lost in the narrative soup of other conclusions in the story. While the Emperor didn't end up being a villain, let's look at the actual villains. Who is the main antagonist of Baldur's Gate 3? Well, arguably, everyone who means to do harm, and that is a beautiful theme, but we do get some main villains. It's just hard to decide who wins the competition. The Elder Brain, or the Nether Brain, is the main villain, correct? But then we have 4 other villains. The Elder Brain, nicknamed the Absolute, is the chaotic alien evil. Raphael is the biblical evil, the Tempter. Gortash and Orion are the organized crime evil, the gangsters. And finally, we have Ketheric Thorm, who is the paladin fallen from grace type of villain. It's like the unholy quintinity of villains. In Baldur's Gate 2, we have Irenicus, a classical villain, singular in his motivation and relatively easy to understand. Irenicus is an elf, fallen from grace and favor. You see, he just wanted power, which leads to his fellow elves casting him out. Now he wants to find his soul in immortality. Irenicus is a sort of scientist. He seeks the one ingredient needed to ascend to godhood. But he has motive. He fell in love with an elven priestess, but his ambition drove her away. Now he is empty and alone. He doesn't just want power, he wants to have a soul again, to feel. We are definitely dealing with a sociopath here, but he constantly motivates and argues his position. He's like a pesky YouTube ad. He even appears in your dreams, haunting you with his ideological arrogance, trying to make you understand his position. And whenever he makes a demonstration of his thesis, he is eloquent and hard to disprove. When you first see him in action, he appears invincible and chooses to be defeated as he gleans an opportunity to advance his goals. He is formidable, adaptable, and cunning. Perhaps the Baldur's Gate villain most comparable with Irenicus is Ketheric Thorm, a brilliant war general who is a follower of Saloon, but who abandons his beliefs and turns his land into a corrupt and sinister place. He was so affected by the death of his daughter that he basically turned to the dark side. Ketheric then becomes a follower of Shar, dies, gets resurrected, abandons Shar, and finally joins in with Myrkul, becoming the champion of the God of Death. He is the leader of the cult of the Absolute, and the main pawn in Gortash's plan. The whole landscape in Act 2 is in theme with Ketheric's nihilism. He is the embodiment of his isolated dark world. Ketheric Thorm ends up betraying not one, but 2 gods, and then betrays his own people by plunging the world in darkness purely out of selfish reasons. Then he brings more suffering through the cult of the Absolute. We see the evil he permeates through the entirety of 2 full acts. So when we meet him, his reputation precedes him, and it feels like the confrontation had been a long time coming. He is the combination of Darth Vader and the Lich King, and that makes him very relatable. It's a type of villain that we understand straight away, and one that makes sense, because his downfall comes from grief. If we look at factors which contribute to a villain's quality in a story, the one that stands out the most is it has to make sense. That is, the villain's motivation. A grieving father turned Darth Vader is something we can believe. The best feature of quality fantasy is not promoting disbelief, but suspending the disbelief with elements of reality that ground the story. Everything that happens here is outlandish fiction, but it feels real because we are confronted with real needs, fears, and motives. I would argue that this is what makes Ketheric Thorm the best villain in Baldur's Gate 3. And when you encounter him, there is even a Luke Skywalker moment where it feels like we have a chance to turn him around. And you can actually convince him to surrender. This gives him an arc and makes him a villain with depth and dimension. Not only does he have an incredible actor behind the imposing design, but when we defeat him, he has a face too that looks like it came straight out from a Dark Souls game. The music is incredible, with high soprano voices cutting through the orchestra in tandem with Dame Alice's flashy moves. It's beautiful. This felt like the final battle of the game. And maybe it should have been. Dealing with Ketheric and his amalgam of monster children is straight out of a dark fantasy epic. Restoring the Moon Towers to their former glory and healing the land feels cathartic. Freeing the Night Song gives a sense of justice. Act 2 is about acceptance and guilt and forgiveness and letting go. The new generation replacing the old corrupted and patriarchal rule, the light defeating the darkness. This, combined with Shadowheart renouncing Shar, is a perfectly led narrative with a satisfying, heartfelt conclusion. Only 40% of players left Act 2. 60% stayed, and I think I know why. They wanted to stay with Shadowheart and the Night Song, in what I think is one of the greatest moments in video gaming. They wanted to freeze it in time. But some players moved on and reached the eponymous city and met Orin. I have only one major issue with Larian. While Baldur's Gate 3 is by all means an inclusive game, we are still denied a true female antagonist. Well, of course, Orin is one, and she is unique and probably the hardest battle in the game for me and my friend. We had to load the game several times to deal with her, and in the end she was a memorable villain. But then something happened. The Dark Urge happened. Who is us? Not us, but you and me, us. Dark Urge arguably makes the player character role in the story much more relevant. You have a past now, a figurative demon that follows you. This is a situation very similar to that of Baldur's Gate 2, and it is well written and well implemented. But it comes at the cost of Orin. Now the artful killer is not Baal's chosen anymore, you are, the Dark Urge. She betrays you and leaves you for dead, and by some miracle you end up on the Mind Flayer ship, which makes the prologue even more complicated, never mind. She then takes your place as Baal's chosen. Not only does this make her petty, but she is not one of the original 3 anymore. You are. Orin then becomes a late-minute substitute for a role that belonged to her in the first place, just to make the story of the player character a bit more interesting. Why? Orin should have been the villain of Act 3. Yes, she is an indiscriminate murderer, but we at least get a glimpse into her past. We get something that at least explains her instability, and this, combined with the difficulty of dealing with her, makes her memorable. She is also the only villain in the game who causes a real inconvenience to the player by kidnapping one of your companions. This not only makes her dangerous, but we feel the pressure to go and deal with her. These are the moments where games become good, when freedom becomes conditional, when you are inconvenienced by some mechanic. But there is not enough space to develop Orin because we get Gortash. Oh, Gortash, 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 Gortash. Why do you have a name that sounds like an orc chieftain from Warcraft? Why do you look like the hybrid between Noel Fielding and the singer from Green Day? Why do you have your own television channel but do not share it with your tax-paying citizens? But most importantly, why are you such a bad villain? Gortash is portrayed as the tyrant. He represents the god of tyranny, and he wants to become a tyrant. Okay, we get it, one-dimensional villain story. So let's look at another tyrant. In Wasteland 3, the idea of villainy is ambiguous as much as it is pervasive. The players end up being the villains many times, even if they try not to. You see, that's the joke of the game. In a post-apocalyptic world, there's no way you can end up being holier than thou. But we do have a tyrant in the form of the Patriarch. And let me say how much I love the writers at In Exile. Sol Buchanan brings stability to the Wasteland by replacing one form of evil with another. He basically unites some clans and destroys others, while placing himself as the president of all under the motto, "I saved you all, brought law and order, and you should worship me." And they do. Now, the fact that he is just as much a piece of waste as the next bad guy is beside the point. We see his achievements, albeit flawed, and there is a sense of order in his land. But more importantly, every time we see him and point out his immoral acts, he justifies his actions and turns our argument around. He's unashamed in admitting he must do the worst for the greater good. And we almost believe him. He's a good villain. Gortash is not. He doesn't justify his actions. His only excuse is that he did something terrible and now he needs your help fixing it. He doesn't explain what the worst alternative to his rule is. He doesn't even offer a palpable reward to the player, but the intangible idea of, "We will share power, trust me." Bro, why do you assume I want to stay and govern Baldur's Gate? My next adventure is Waterdeep. If you pick him as an ally, the game just kills him, reducing him even more. At the end of the day, all Gortash manages to accomplish is a very, very cool haircut. There is a story at the beginning of the game which says that even gods can be killed. Maybe this is a lesson about downfall brought by arrogance. Maybe not. But we finally deal with the Elder Brain, and yes, most final bosses are not that interesting story-wise, because we already have experienced all the turns and twists of the story before we meet them. So then, as a game narrative designer, you can go two ways. You either make the confrontation a symbolic one, like the one from Pillars of Eternity Deadfire, where you debate a god in philosophy and try to convince him what to do with all of existence, or simply make it a very tough battle, like the one in Elden Ring. Baldur's Gate 3 tries the middle. You face the Elder Brain, which turns out to be a Nether Brain, and if you try to dominate it, you fail. Here is where the game does respect the game's philosophy. Just like Gortash, Orin, and Ketheric, who tried to dominate the brain and failed, so do you. Because power of this magnitude is not supposed to belong to anyone. You can't just go about and try to control people's minds. Then the battle with the brain's minions begins, and you can summon all the allies you have gathered throughout the story. If you are a min-maxing freak, the battle is not that difficult, although it's nice to see the allies you have gathered in your adventures come to your aid. Side point here. Wouldn't it have been very cool if you could have still used the Warhorn to summon Lump and his buddies here? Or you can use the in-game cheat code called Gale, who explodes everything and fast skips the final battle. Did I say that this game has fantastic RPG options? Perhaps the best ending to this, after you destroy the brain, is the open ending where you join Karlach and travel to Hell to fix her engine heart problem. But that kind of steals away any feeling of finality. Astarion runs away like a rat, perhaps a fitting end to him rejecting my character's attempt at romance. Shadowheart has a new hair color. Lae'zel leaves with two very cool dragons to liberate the Gith. You know, all's well that not really ends? I mean, just the cinematic with the dragons and Karlach smoking must have taken ages to program. I think what the main story of Baldur's Gate 3 lacks is a sense of finality. When a hero reaches the end of the quest, they need to feel changed. This doesn't happen with your character, and while it does with your companions, their stories are disconnected from yours. By comparison, Divinity Original Sin 2, Larian's opus magnum before Baldur's Gate 3, feels much more consistent. The main quest is full of revelations, and the main character goes through different stages of change. It's fulfilling, cathartic, and most importantly final. In Divinity 2, you are the story. In Baldur's Gate 3, you are the catalyst that moves the story. Both are good, but when I think back to Divinity, it's a bit more memorable. I'm curious, what was your most memorable moment in the game? And if that answer, as in my case, doesn't involve the main story, then you understand the premise of my critique. The main story of Baldur's Gate 3 is fine. The side story is almost a masterclass in writing. I want to make a quick mention here about Skyrim, and I realize at this point that my quick mentions are not that quick, so I apologize for that. When I think about Skyrim, it's not the tepid Civil War story that comes to mind, or the lackluster Dragonborn quest, but an amazing underground micro-universe and the side quest called Blackreach. That was my favorite quest. The time when I got completely lost in the world building of the game. In Blackreach, you discover a whole world hiding underneath Skyrim, which lets you glimpse into Skyrim's distant past. You encounter a corrupted race called the Falmer, who once roamed the surface as snow elves. Driven into the underground by xenophobic Nords and then betrayed and enslaved by the Dwemer, they are the living proof of what bigotry can lead to. Blackreach gives the Civil War story a lot more depth, as the Nords are about to repeat the same mistake their ancestors had made in the past. You also see the remnants of a civilization, the Dwemer, who couldn't prevent their own downfall, arrogant in their use of technology, and insensitive in their dealing with the Snow Elves. Blackreach, with its beautiful dark environment and twisted mazes, is the warning that lies underneath the events of the game. It's also proof of expert world building. I had the same feeling when I visited the Moonrise Towers area in Baldur's Gate 3. When Ketheric Thorn released Shar's darkness upon the land, it became cursed and corrupted, half immersed in the Dark Lady's otherworldly domain. It became the Shadowlands. As a result, the inhabitants of Moonrise Towers are trapped between two planes, slowly fading into the void and forgetting who they are. It's a story about how the selfishness of one person can affect an entire people. The consequences of Kethric's betrayals are horrific, his children using the corrupted land as their playground. Even justice seems much crueler here, when a Justicar wants to bring a woman back from the dead to answer for her crimes. And then, at the turn of a corner, Raphael awaits, a finely dressed peacock, visiting a stained and corrupted place, to lure us into a deal, to use us. He takes advantage of the smallest weakness, and when the Tieflings are in mortal danger again, he uses their fresh trauma to draw a mole into a devil's contract. The world of Baldur's Gate 3 is a very hostile place. The entire freaking game is filled with things that want to kill you, sacrifice you, take your eyes out, literally, or eat you. And no, I don't just mean the owlbear. The dark side of this game is so horrible that becoming good is not just a moral choice, but a return to sanity. I think Baldur's Gate 3 reminds us, even as a fantasy setting, that evil is ultimately evil. We have become so used to explaining and romanticizing villains, but here we don't really get that. The villains are malevolent and utterly selfish, so therefore the only choice is to destroy them, or help those affected by their actions. I'm not judging evil playthroughs, I'm just explaining why you would be motivated to choose the good path. And that idea is portrayed by all the NPCs the player meets on their journey. The effects of your actions reverberate throughout the game, and are not isolated by a mere physical reward. The Tieflings you save in the first act appear in Act 2 and then reappear in Act 3. The moral choice of saving them has an echo that lasts for the entirety of the game. You not only save life, but you also give life. When you first encounter the cultists of the Absolute, you can be cruel, but you can also be kind and respect their older brother's final wish, to protect them, even if you don't know them, even if you hate them. The game teaches you an important lesson. It's so easy to become that from which you have escaped, an oppressor. The game argues why you should be good, compared to just forcing you to be good because there are no viable evil playthroughs. This is an elegant solution to the eternal dilemma of I can be evil because the game doesn't give me an interesting evil path. With Dirge, you have a backstory that makes you inherently evil. This gives purpose to your character without taking away the role-playing choice. You have a sense of direction, similar to Baldur's Gate 2. In Neverwinter Nights, you are an adventurer joining the Academy, who ends up saving the city from an ancient evil cult. In Morrowind, you are the Chosen One, the Nerevarine. And this is relevant because we need to feel important in video games, whether we end up being the hero or the anti-hero. And sure, the legacy characters in Baldur's Gate 3 were supposed to give you that sense of identity. But because they are so flawed, none of them end up feeling like the main character. Also, have you noticed how incredibly obnoxious they are? I don't know why Larian went out of their way to make these companions so unlikable, but I found it hard to identify with any of them. Well, maybe except Karlach. Karlach is alright. With Dark Urge, we not only get the main character's story that the game lacked so much, but also something that we need to fix. More importantly, the events that happen around you are disturbing and disruptive. The trademark of a good RPG is the story affecting your character just enough that you feel you need to do something without the game encumbering your playthrough too much. When you inadvertently claim your first victim as the Dark Urge, the game presents you with options to cover your murder, which naturally most players feel like doing. It's Lae'zel who discovers the murder and confronts you about it. But instead of judging you, she simply blames it on the effect of the tadpole in your head. But let's face it, Lae'zel doesn't shy away from a bit of killing, especially of some anonymous bard that she probably disliked. But this surprising show of support for what is arguably one of the worst things you've ever done in a game is heartwarming. For the first time in this game, I saw Lae'zel as a friend, someone who understands and supports me. And all the game had to do was to generate an event and then let a companion react to it through their natural personality. This was an authentic moment of role-playing, and this is what role-playing games should aspire to accomplish. Natural and authentic interactions between the player character and those they meet. Because if you care for them, that makes all of your actions more significant. It seems like wherever there is an isolated and really messed up story, Larian excels at it. Whether it's Mystic Carrion and his unfortunate customers, or the sad tale of a girl who wants to resurrect her brother, or the boy who plays hide-and-seek with his ghost family. But there's one side quest that really stuck with me, and that's the Arcane Tower. The Arcane Tower belongs to a brilliant cleric named Lenore. Of course, with anything in Baldur's Gate 3, you can stumble upon it just by exploring. But if you talk to Blurg first, he points you here to find the rare ingredients we need for a potion that could potentially cure our Mind Flayer condition. So, in a way, our quest for survival brings us here only to find a place of veritable loneliness and sadness. First, we find the letter from Lenore to her partner Ire, urging him to wait for her when she returns as she feels very lonely in the tower. Depending on how we get here, we might have come upon a tombstone. The grave is actually not for a person, but for a dog. There is even a telescope Lenore uses to watch the grave from her tower. We obviously don't know the details of the relationship between Lenore and Ire, but we can assume that relationships don't come easy for arcane practitioners in pursuit of knowledge. We get that Lenore is very lonely from the fact that she misses her dog, so much so that she ends up pursuing a bullet to tame as a new pet. Her butler, the automaton called Bernard, reacts only to quotes from a play about loneliness and survival. He is programmed to hug Lenore and lift her spirits, and finally he is programmed to kill Lenore in case her depression becomes too much. This is the kind of side quests that make you forget about the main story completely, and for good reason. It's real. And because the Baldur's Gate 3 community is so kind, there are players who even wanted to track Lenore down in Baldur's Gate. Borislav Slavov, the composer of Baldur's Gate 3, talks about a musical theme, how it needs to be strong and scalable. I think this idea incorporates the vision of the entire game. Music theory encompasses game theory here. There is a theme to Baldur's Gate 3, and that is not power, but kindness, acceptance, and understanding. There is one thing I found out only after finishing the game. In the scene where Shadowheart is conflicted between killing the Night Song or setting her free, my group rolled a critical success to convince her to do the right thing. After expending 4 points of inspiration and not loading the game. We were so happy, lucky. We thought we saved Shadowheart, saved her soul. But if you choose to trust her, she will make the right choice, on her own. If you trust her, she will come through. If you don't, there is a high chance that she will fail because of the high DC roll. So imagine how disappointed I was to find out that we didn't trust her. Well done Sarah, John, Martin, Adrian, or Royiri, Stephen, Jan Von, Kevin, Diana, Crystal, Gavin, Ella, Rachel, Adam, or Inevan, or whoever of you wrote that moment. It's really well done. In an interview for Dungeons & Dragons, Sven Vinke talks about Larian's fears for the success of Baldur's Gate 3. And it makes sense. They made a huge game, and when you have so many variables, it's hard to predict how the players will react to them. And this is the main advantage and flaw of Baldur's Gate 3. There's just too much to dive into. So the main plot becomes dissipated, diluted. It's like publishing the entirety of Song of Ice and Fire series at the same time and waiting to see how the readers will respond to it. It's a massive gamble. Okay, not everyone is a Song of Ice and Fire fan. Baldur's Gate 3 is like a huge cake that has 4 types of different chocolate. With so many flavors, all you get at the end is the taste of sugar. But ultimately, role-playing games are about memorable moments. I will never forget the Night Song scene, or how much fun I had seeing goblins groveling at my drow feet. Or when I played the Mission Impossible theme while my Gith friends snuck into the printing press, only to find out that it was a talking printing press. Those are the good moments of gaming. Anyway, that's my take on Baldur's Gate 3. I do hope you've enjoyed my essay. Please comment, tell me what you think, please share what was your favorite moment in the game, and as a final thought, stop pre-ordering games unless they are early access release. You must roll a natural 20 for wisdom save or subscribe to this channel. Farewell and see you soon.